know that, and we are beginning to record now. Yeah, so thank you for joining us on this webinar, Surveying the COVID-19 Impact on Business Associations, presented by Grace Nzou. This is part of our webinar series that we've been doing to adapt to this pandemic response by hosting a series of virtual events targeted mainly at associations and the challenges that they are facing during these times. And so we had a 4-part series with Bob Harris, an associations expert, including an Ask the Expert panel with CIPE's own Wumi Gabatamosi and Grace Nzou as well. And then Grace has previously presented on the different types of communications applications that are out there and that we have the ability to use to communicate with our audiences. And so we're really excited to have Grace back today presenting on surveys. And so if you don't know Grace, she is one of CIPE Africa's foremost communications expert. She's the CEO and co-founder of Niusline Media Limited, a Kenyan public relations and communications company. And Grace regularly leads trainings for BMOs, NGOs, SMEs, and corporate clients as well. So she's an extremely skilled presenter, she's knowledgeable, and we at CIPE are very fortunate to have her. We're grateful that she's joining us today. So today's webinar, Grace will be covering why we survey, the different types of surveys that we can have, and most importantly, how to present the results of those surveys in a way that is meaningful to your audience and to the what you are trying to communicate. And so today, we invite you again to introduce yourself in the chat box, which you can find at the bottom of your screen below. You can tell us your name, what country or city that you're joining from, and what organization you're with. We also encourage you to use the question and answer function, in which during the presentation you can ask a question and we'll have the opportunity to stop and Grace can answer some of those questions from the audience. As well, we'll at the end have a live question and answer session with all the attendees. And so if you'd like to ask a question over the audio, you can use the raise your hand feature and you'll be unmuted and can ask a question and we can have more of a discussion. And yeah, without further ado, that is going to be today's webinar. And Grace, I will turn it over to you to begin your presentation today. So thank you for joining us.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael, for that introduction. I'm hoping that our participants are introducing themselves on the chat box. We want to confirm that everybody is able to use the chat box and they know how to do that, because that's important. This is going to be an interactive session. We'll be hoping that we can interact with you, and therefore we'll be very happy to confirm that you know where your chat box is and where the question and answer is and all that. It's very important that you're able to be able to do that. So today, let me say today because I do not want to say this morning. Some of us are just ending our day. So today we want to talk about a very practical thing that is most likely going to help us as organizations to actually sail through this pandemic. This conversation today is not just about the pandemic. It's not about what we are all going through in the world. This is actually a conversation about what you should be doing constantly. It's just that it comes from this, it comes at this time or during this time, but it's very, very important that beyond this and beyond now, we make this a habit so that we are able to make a lot of sense and we are able to communicate with our clients very well, have very good information that helps us to advocate, and have extremely good data to help us make decisions so that we can serve our clients very well and our members very well, and also just make sound business decisions. Because whether you're an association or you're a business, you are supposed to make good decisions that should take you or should move you forward. And so what I want us to do is begin by, first of all, understanding the basics. And the basic question is, what is a survey? Okay, so I'll not ask you to answer that. I'll ask Michael to take us to that survey, the slide. Thank you, Michael. So a survey is basically a way that we try to collect information. A survey is important because it helps us to get information about people. These people we are talking about are our target audience. So we are talking about our members, we're talking about our clients, people that we serve, people around us. And why do we want to survey them, or why do we want to collect information from them? Because we want to find out, what do they know about something? Or what are their needs about a certain thing? What are their attitudes about certain things? Now, surveys are conducted all the time. It's just that a lot of the all the time we never get to see the results, because businesses collect this information in other forms that we probably don't consider a survey. Like, for example, loyalty cards, very popular in supermarkets in this part of the world, where every supermarket has a loyalty card that they give you. And then they, every time you purchase, you have to give it to them. In exchange, of course, the incentive is that they give you a few points that you can redeem for products later without, using any money. And that is common in many countries, and also in many, many organizations. Even banks do that with your credit card. They do that when you shop right now, like in Kenya, when you shop on M-Pesa, they collect that kind of data. They know when you load airtime, for instance, in your telecommunication company, and you've seen this happening. When you load data immediately from your telecommunication company, depending on how good they are at their data mining, they will quickly send you a text message and say, we have this offer for this amount. If you load like $5 or $10, you can get a bundle for this bandwidth. And it seems to come at the exact moment when you have just loaded your airtime on your phone. And the reason for this is because they collect your data constantly. They know your behavior. And because of that, they're able to develop products and services that suit you. And they will send you that message at the appropriate moment, or on the day where they have studied and realized this is the day when you most likely load your data, load your airtime or something like that. So for us, why then, for us, of course, as businesses, we shall be conducting surveys. And why do we want to conduct a survey? We want to conduct a survey because we have a question about the organization. We have questions about our organizations, questions around what are our businesses going through right now. We have questions around what do our members want, our clients, how can we serve them right now, and how do they want to participate right now? Or how can we help them continue to do business in a relevant way right now? We have questions about what products and services do they want, and how can we offer these products appropriately at this time when we are going through this to get information, so that you're constantly in touch with your members and you're able to serve them.
Grace, could you actually just repeat that last part? I think the microphone cut out. Grace, I think we've hit a bit of a...
Please.
Grace, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
We just lost you for about the last 30 seconds. Do you mind just repeating that last part?
Oh yeah, sure. I was just saying that the reason why
Seems the audio is cut out again. Grace, you're muted.
Right. Sorry, are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah, so the reason I was saying the reason why we do a survey is because we are trying to answer the question of how can we serve our members very well? How can we offer them the services that they need? How can we be in touch with them? How can we make sure that we do not forget us constantly and always during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic? Michael, kindly go to the next slide. All right, so when you're conducting surveys, there are various types of surveys you can conduct. Basically, the type of survey I'm talking about here is a survey that is conducted based on which method that you use. So you could conduct online surveys, and these are basically surveys that you do using digital tools. For example, you could use the SurveyMonkey forms. You could use SurveyMonkey rather as a tool that will help you to conduct a survey. You could use Google Forms to collect data. You could do a poll on any of the social media platforms. You could do collect data through Facebook. You could do collect data through Twitter. You could do collect data through WhatsApp. Whatever digital channel that you use, the channel that doesn't force you to meet people physically. That's the kind of online survey we're talking about. We also have paper surveys, and this would really require that you meet with people face to face. They respond to questionnaires and such kinds of things. This may not work very well during this time because of the social distancing, and therefore you may want to consider, just sticking to the online surveys. And then we have, of course, telephone surveys, where we have on phones, so that where you call people to them and find out about, how they're, talk to them, find out their needs, ask them questions, and at the end of the day, you're able to get information from them. Now, we said, why do we do a survey? We conduct surveys because we want to uncover, answers, answer the questions that we talked about earlier. We want to evoke a discussion. From where we all sit, the fact that we are, some of us, business associations, we're in business associations, even the fact that you're just in business, you need to evoke a discussion, and this discussion should be a discussion that makes changes or generates the agenda of conversation. I'll give you an example. Right now, the discussion in the world is all really around COVID-19. How are businesses conducting business right now? But the most important question you should probably, discussion now we should probably be having is, how do we live or conduct business in the new normal? Now, we must guide that discussion in that direction. We cannot just guide it by, just sitting and expecting things to happen. We can only guide that discussion by having or generating the conversation and forcing people to talk about it. Like, for instance, if you conduct a survey and release the results at this time, it's a way to start setting the agenda. And that's very, very important in business and just to help your association and your business to move forward. So we do surveys to evoke discussion. We do surveys because we want to have objective information. Like we've said in our previous webinars, we must have data so that we can conduct proper advocacy. It's completely useless and completely out of hand to expect people to make, especially the governments, to make good decisions for businesses when they do not have data. And therefore, when you have a survey or when you have conducted a survey, it gives you the opportunity to actually say very confidently and guide, show the government the way of how they can sort out problems and situations and circumstances for businesses now and moving forward. Finally, we conduct surveys because we need to compare results. What's happening between, what's happening in Kenya and in Nigeria? What are the differences? What are the intersections? Where can we learn from each other? How can we benchmark on such situations? And how can we make sure that we learn and we benefit and help ourselves to move forward in a certain situation. That's the reason why we conduct survey. So now, how do you conduct a survey?
Grace, I think this
How
is
exactly you conduct a survey?
Grace,
I will talk about this. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think this is actually a great time to pause for a minute, and we have a quick poll that we can launch, and then also to facilitate the question in the chat box from our attendees of what information do you want from your members in a survey? So I'm going to launch this poll. Is that showing up?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Beautiful. And then, yeah, as I said, it would be great for our attendees if you could just type quickly in the chat box what kind of information you would want to get from a survey of your members at the current time. Great. And Grace, in your experience so far, what for some of the COVID-19 surveys that you have seen distributed, what kind of information have people been attempting to collect?
Okay, so part of the, what I have seen people trying to find out from the surveys they are conducting, they are first of all trying to establish how long, of course, the businesses have run, what sector they are in, and how the sectors have been, how their businesses have been interrupted as far as cash flow is concerned, as far as employment or employees and retention of employees is concerned, as far as marketing, as far as the value chains. That's the kind of information I have seen being collected in various surveys. And at the end of this webinar, we will be talking about one of the surveys that has been conducted by one of our partners, the Uasin Gishu Chamber. They just launched it this morning, a few hours ago, for they that are just waking up. So just this morning, the Uasin Gishu Chamber launched a survey on the effect of COVID-19 on businesses in their county, Uasin Gishu County, which is one of our partners in, here in Kenya, CIPE Kenya.
Great. And so I just published the poll results. It looks as though some have conducted a survey related to COVID-19, some have not, but the majority intend to later. And so we're glad you can join us. Great. Grace, you can continue. We'll go to the next slide.
All right. So we have just talked about, what's a survey. We've said a survey is when you are just trying to collect information from from people. You're trying to find out how are people, what are their attitudes about things, what are these things, that their opinions, what are their needs, and such kinds of things. And we've said the reason why we conduct a survey is because we're trying to answer a question. What are the concerns? How can we serve our members better, and such kinds of things? And we've said when you're conducting a survey, you could do it online, you could take telephone, you could do it on telephone, or you could decide to send paper surveys, and you say that is not just working right now. That said, we have said right now everybody should try and focus on the online surveys and the telephone surveys. They are more practical given our circumstances, and they are also very easy in terms of collecting the data. A lot of the survey tools that are available online allow you to benefit from getting data that is already collected. They collect it for you, so it's not, the analysis doesn't take as long as it would usually take. Therefore, knowing why we conduct surveys and all that, then the next question would be, So how would you conduct an online survey? So very quickly, I want to go through that. The first thing, of course, is that you want to start with your responses in mind. You want to start by clearly understanding what it is that you want to achieve. And once you know exactly what you want to achieve, then you can start asking the right questions. So you don't start by asking the questions. You start first of all say, what do I want to gather? Say, for example, you want to find out the impact of COVID-19 on businesses that are women-led in your county or in your country. So you want to be clear about what information it is that you want first. And then now ask the questions. By being clear on what you want, you will pretty much have defined who your target audience is going to be, or even your sample. Who are you going to survey? You're able to do that by clearly answering the question of what answer do I want. Then once you know that, of course, your target audience will be clear. Whom do you want to survey? Whom do you want to talk to? And then you need to now sit down and develop your questions. Your questions should be very, very specific. So you do not want to ask questions that will end up giving you answers that may not help in terms of decision making. So you want to make sure that you ask questions that allow your audience to give you as much information as possible, but in a very specific way. So for instance, you want to find out where are people getting information online, or where are people getting information, where are they consuming the information from during the pandemic. So you will not ask the question like, are you getting information from Facebook during the pandemic? That's, first of all, it's a leading question, and definitely it will be a yes or no answer. It will not help you very much. But you may want to ask the question, how are you getting your information during the pandemic? That will give you a more elaborate response that you can actually work with. Once you come up with your questions, then the other thing you need to do is pre-test your questionnaire. Make sure that the tool that you have developed, your questionnaire, works and it makes sense. One way of finding out or establishing whether your questionnaire makes sense is you may want to, ask somebody, give the questionnaire to someone, and if that person is able to quickly, give you an answer, a yes or a no answer to certain things, to certain questions, then you know that your questionnaire will not help you very much. So you want to make sure that your questionnaire is specific, but it also gives you all the information that you want. Once you have fine-tuned your questionnaire, then it is time for you to administer it to your target market. Usually you want to send your questionnaire to more people than the kind of responses you would need, so that it makes sense for you. The more people that you have receiving your questionnaire, the better, because not everybody sends back the response. So you want to send it out as much as possible. I'll give an example, like the survey that was conducted by Wasingishu in their county. They sent out to 400 people and they only got back 140 questionnaires. So you can see you want to be as wide, send the information to as many people as possible within your target market. Once you send it out, of course, you will receive the data back. You will have used an online tool, so the analysis will be much easier. It will be much faster. And then you will want now to make sure that you generate the reports very quickly. Now, the reports that you generate should definitely be reports that are useful, but they should also be reports that are very that are good to look at in terms of visual. They should be reports that have got very good visuals, so that at the end of the day they actually make sense and they are easy to read and they are appealing to your audience. Finally, and this is the most important thing, your report needs to have a home. Now, many people generate beautiful reports, and then launch them even. But then the reports do not have a home. You keep looking for the report. You know, they put it out in the media somewhere, and you keep looking for that report and you will never find it. Why? Because it was never placed anywhere for anybody to receive it. So you want to make sure that the report, the final report, is available. I always say it's always good to have the report in two ways. You can have a long version and you can have a popular version. The full report, it's the long version. It could be whatever number of pages you want, as you may like. The shorter, the better, because conciseness is very important when you want to communicate. And then you could have a popular version report. Anything below 10 pages works very well, so that people can read it and they can identify with it very well. Your long and your full version or full report, you may want to make sure that that report is a report that is will have more details. Of course, it will have more text. Your popular version, you may want to package it in such a way that people can just enjoy looking at it and they can enjoy reading it very, very quickly, and that it might make sense for them. Now, once you do a survey, what you have, your result of the survey, is data. So you have data, and a lot of us and a lot of people, of course, sometimes even your audience, may not be able to make sense of that data. So they'll be wondering, what exactly are you talking about, and how does this affect our lives at all? It is your work as the owner of the data to guide that conversation and to guide those thoughts. Don't let it out, leave it out for other people to do that. And that is why it's very important that you're able to give your data a voice. I want us to talk about giving data voice, because that's usually the last part of a survey that a lot of people overlook. And that is what makes the difference between a good report or a successful survey and one that just happened. We do not want to have surveys that just happened. So we must give our data voice. We give our data a voice by making sure that we put in a human perspective. One way, and I'll say this very quickly, the quickest way is to have, of course, first of the quickest way is to make sure that your data is readable and palatable by the people that will see it. So you want to come up with diagrams, very nice diagrams that people can quickly look at and appreciate. They need to be very good visuals. This visual could either be a photograph, it could be a pie chart, it could be an infographic, it could be a video clip, but something that helps us to showcase that particular data, that particular story. Then you need to make sure that the story that you tell is told in a very simple language. You do not want to tell information or tell the story in a very complicated way. You want to simplify it, sort of like bring it home to people. So for instance, if you're talking about the impact of tax reduction by government right now because of the COVID-19, and you are talking to small businesses, you want to explain to them how that translates to their accounts, in their shops, in their businesses. How does that affect their lives at the end of the day? For you to be able to do that, then you need to simplify it and you need to give it a story. For instance, you may want to tell a story of how just by looking at the data of a business, for example, you could decide to tell a story of how the reduction in taxes is going to provide more money for a small business to grow, and therefore they are able to employ more people or an extra hand, or they are able to employ new technology to help them become more efficient, or they are able to get this money so they can expand their marketing or develop a new product that has been brought, or a demand of a new product that has been brought in the market now because of COVID-19. So if you're able to join that narrative and tell that narrative in that way, then your data makes sense. And we're saying you should be able to use visuals, because visuals are very important. That is what people will remember, and that is what people will be able to tell. Now, when you have your story, you'll find that a lot of times, you'll have this beautiful data, and you're wondering, okay, so now where do I begin with this story? Do I begin by telling people about, do I just tell them about this report? And this report is too comprehensive. For example, the data, the survey report I was talking about from Uasin Gishu Chamber this morning, that they launched this morning, it has information about 10 different sectors and how they've been affected by COVID-19. It has information about different regions and how they have been affected by COVID-19. It has information about how the employment or the human resource has been affected by COVID-19. So if you're telling a story about that, what perspective do you take? With that report, what perspective do you take? There are various perspectives that you can actually take to make sure that your report is or your story is well told and people begin to appreciate it. The first perspective is the perspective of change over time. You could look at what information you have and begin to ask, see how has change over time affected this particular, how has change over time affected the data or the story that you can tell. For example, we can begin, and I've seen this in most of the surveys, they're asking, was your business running in March 2020? And then the next question is, how many employees did you have in March 2020? And how many employees do you have in May 2020, for instance? So with that information, you can tell a story of majority of businesses have downsized by 60%, for example. But even as you do that, you can drill into that data and say this 60% of people that have been laid off are actually in the hotel industry or hospitality sector. So you can also tell the information by drilling in on particular details of the same data. Or you could decide, I will tell this story by looking at it from a big perspective. I compare it. Like, for instance, for instance, you talk about when you zoom out, you compare it widely with other sectors, like what's happening in the hospitality sector in Kenya versus Nigeria, or what's happening in the hospitality sector in one county versus the other, or in one region, Africa versus the US, for example. And you may want to look at data from industries that were previously, for example, growing, like we know tourism was one of the sectors that we have shared as the world. We have interests, all of us have interests as a world in it. So now, how is the tourism sector doing in China and in Kenya, for example, or in the US and Kenya, or in Europe and Kenya, like those markets that we were working with? How are they working? How is it working now? And how can we use this information to change our products? Another way you could look at this is by contrasting. Another perspective would be to contrast. And here is where you compare one result over the other. So you look at, what have you found out here versus what are you seeing in this area, and you're able to actually tell the story. And then you may also want to tell the story from an intersection perspective. Where does this data meet? So usually when you come up with a survey and you're writing your report, you should not just base your report on just what you have found out. You want to look at what are other people also saying about that? What is other data related to this? What is it also saying about the same topic of your discussion? And where are the convergence? Where is the convergence? Where are these intersections? And how can you use the intersections to actually tell the story? You may find, for instance, that where data matches or there are intersections in data, then you can actually tell this story in a way that people can either benchmark, or they can learn from each other, or learn what not to do. And we have seen this happening with the COVID-19 situation right now. When the pandemic started, it was, we were quickly told, don't behave like certain people, behave like certain people. And we have seen how it's all working together. It's still a study going on, a worldwide one. Now, the other thing, of course, that you may want to look at is factors. When you're conducting a survey, you will find that the information or the data that you collect might be influenced by data trends, or might be influenced by certain factors. And so those factors could also help to give you a perspective of that particular story and how you're able to tell it. So now you have a survey. You know why you want to survey. You know why you want to conduct a survey. You've answered your questions. You know your target audience. You have gone ahead and conducted the survey. You have a report. Your beautiful report is well presented. It encompasses everything. It's wholesome. It has a home on your website, on your social media pages. When you go there, we can find it. And then you have given us different perspectives. So how do you tell this story? How do you package it so that we can be able to understand it? I said a data story requires that you put in a narrative. It requires that you give details. It requires visuals so that it sticks, and so that the message is well received. And so you need to utilize various techniques to be able to promote the use of narratives and visual content. One way is to do a feature story. Now, when you launch your survey, a lot of times you will have the media, of course, there with cameras. They will come and they will take nice, good shots of your survey. You will have pomp and color and whatever. That's a news story. The news story appears during the news bulletin, and it is forgotten just as fast. However, we say one of the reasons we conduct surveys is because we want to set the agenda. We want to guide the conversation to our benefit. So how do you do that? Then what you need to do is have a follow-up story, which will be a feature story. A feature story allows you to tell your story in detail, but most importantly, it gives a face, a human face to your data. So this is where, for example, when you're talking about the hospitality industry and the effect of COVID-19 in the hospitality industry in your county, for example, this is where you will have a journalist go to the hotel and see the situation. They will take shots of empty restaurants, for example, and they will hear the story from the receptionist at the hotel, who will say something like, before this started, we used to have at least 20 guests per night. Most of our guests used to arrive between 6 and 7 or 10 o'clock in the night. Now we don't have any guests. So you're telling us a feature. And as you do that, you have the human face, but you also bring in the face of an expert. The expert will be you, or the person from an association or working on behalf of the association. The person who actually conducted the survey would usually be a very good person. But if they're not good with narratives and everything, then you would want to get maybe the chairman or the CEO of the association, so that actually come in and say, we conducted a survey, and this is what we found out is happening in this particular hospitality sector. And then you would also go to the government, and the county government would say, we used to collect levies amounting to this amount. Or you'd go to the catering levy, like in Kenya, you go to the catering levy, tourism and catering levy, and they would say, every month we used to receive this kind of levies from hotels, but now we are receiving this amount. So you bring the story together, give it a human face, and do a feature story. A feature story can either be on the newspapers, it can be on television, or it can be a blog. Whichever way, it needs to be a space or a platform that allows you to tell your story in detail and allows you to give an opportunity for visuals so people can actually see what it is that you're talking about. You want to participate in media interviews. Immediately you launch your survey. You don't want to sit back. You want to get in touch with the media. Request to plug into their existing platforms. Our media is constantly looking for information. So you want to tell them, we did a survey, I want to talk about this survey, but from this perspective. Remember, we talked about the perspectives. So I want to do a survey and I want to talk about the survey from the emerging trends or the factors that have made Kenyans behave like this, or Nigerians or Americans behave like this and versus this other way. The media interviews, of course, could be on TV, they could be on radios, you could do vlogs, the video logs, I'll be talking about that in just a short while. You could also decide to do press events. Press events are especially good for surveys that are on visual, that have good visuals. Like, for example, if you're talking about factory, if you're talking about a factory, the effect of COVID-19 to factories, for instance, it would be a very good visual if you can take the media to a factory where they can see a factory operating at maybe 20% capacity or something like that, or even a farm, or something that has tangible products. That is what would work very well for you to conduct a media tour. Finally, you need to generate visual content. Now, what kind of visual content am I talking about? I'm talking about visual content that makes people see the story at a glance. This could be, for example, an infographic. It could be a slideshow or a presentation. It could be images that are posted on Instagram or Twitter or Facebook, wherever. And of course, videos. Now you're probably sitting there and asking yourself, okay, Grace, how am I going to start putting together these things you're talking about? Infographics, slideshows, because I am all by myself in the office, or our office has cut down. We don't have capacity right now to do a lot of these things. How are we going to do that? I have an answer for you. The answer is called online tools. Luckily for us, we live in the 21st century. And I was just speaking to somebody this morning and I was telling them the difference between our situation right now and 1918 when the Spanish pandemic happened is that we have the benefit of technology. And because of technology, we are able to sort out a lot of things. 100 years later, it's working better for everybody. And therefore, there are various online tools that can actually help you very much to be able to participate, to bring this information together. These tools are, listed there. For example, let me just talk about the most popular one, Facebook Live. So you are in your space right now, you don't have probably resources to undertake a full-blown video documentary, and you're just wondering, how do I tell this story that I have right now? Simply go to your Facebook page. On your Facebook page, there's a simple small button called Live. Go live. All you need is data and your phone. Using that, you're able to tell your story to the world, and they're able to actually understand what it is that you're saying, and you're able to give perspective to a lot of things. I will tell you this, most of the changes that we see in the world, sometimes most of them are not generated by the most, very complicated, using very complicated ways. Most changes happen because someone communicated the right information at the right time. This is the right time for you to be able to develop the kind of information, factual information, that you're collecting from your members. If you're able to talk to your members and explain to them, the effects of certain things that are happening, maybe policies that government is making, or you're able to show them ways to sort out their current challenges right now, then they will be able to rely on you moving forward from now and forever, hopefully, as you continue to serve them. So we are saying it's important that you undertake surveys, and these surveys should help you to make decisions on how you will serve them. Once you undertake the surveys, package them properly. Put them in tools or in packages that are palatable, as feature stories, as media stories, appear on TV to talk about this, where you completely do not have access to TV, or even you still have access to TV. Don't rely on the media 100%. If it's not working, it's not working. Use what's in your hands, your phone. Use that is in your hands, your phone. Conduct Facebook Live shows. Go to Instagram, do the same. Go to Twitter, generate content, start a hashtag. And every time you start the hashtag, always remember to put the URL for your report, because it has to be relevant and people must be able to see that. Keep the conversation going and don't relent until you're able to actually make sense for your members and for your businesses and even just for yourself. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Grace. We appreciate that. And now, thank you for covering all of that. One thing we can do is I am going to pause the presentation here for a moment and actually bring up an example survey that Grace has shared. And Grace, you can walk through that. But while we do that, we encourage you to write in some questions through the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. You can click and we can answer those questions live. You can also use the raise your hand feature and we'll unmute you and you can ask a question. And we encourage you to stay through the end. We'll do this for maybe 20-30 minutes, depending on the stream of questions. And then we do have an announcement at the end for all of our chambers and association members about an upcoming grant opportunity. So we have one hand raised here. I will open that up while I also stop the presentation share. Great. And if you could just introduce yourself once you're unmuted and where you're coming from. All right. Techno CC7, you're with us.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
My name is Michael Ozo from Niger Chamber of Commerce, and then from NICOBA, Niger State Coalition of Business and Professional Association. I want to commend Grace for the well-presented topic. Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can
So
hear you.
I want to commend her.
All right, Michael, we lost you there. Okay, I think we've lost Michael. Michael, if your audio comes back, you can unmute, or we can you can put a question into the question box. We do have a question from John Mate, and he says, after the survey, what happens if you find the needs of members that you can't solve? Sorry, what happens if you find needs of members that you can't solve because of varied reasons or inability to solve?
The presentation. Just that I went in because, you know, it was a revealing.
Uh-oh. I think we're having some technical challenges here. I think Michael may have disconnected. All right, Grace, are you able to see this question?
No, I'm not able to see it. If you could just read it out for me.
Yeah, he says, so John asks, after the survey, what happens if you find the needs of members cannot be solved for varied reasons or your own inability to solve?
Okay, so I'm assuming that you find that you have. So he's asking what happens if you find that what your members need is not, you're not in a position to sort it out. That's what he's asking.
Correct.
Right. So one of the things that you want to appreciate is that just because you're conducting a survey doesn't mean that you have a solution to everything. Let's begin from there. You're conducting the survey to first of all find out, do a situation analysis and then see what you can do. And the solutions that you come up with, or whatever your members expect, or whatever you find out in your survey, does not always require instant solutions. And your members don't actually expect it anyway. They expect you to start solving them. And so you may want to eat the elephant in bits. That is number one. Start from what you call the low-hanging fruit. There's always a low-hanging fruit. It's impossible for an association to say, we have problems that we cannot sort at all. There are always those small ways that you can help your members and you can sort out their challenges. For example, say your members want linkages to an international value chain, for example, and you honestly don't have capacity to do that and you don't know how to do that. What you may want to do is provide them, for example, you may want to start providing them with trainings on various value chains, other value chains that, or how to interact get into value chains as you find a solution towards that. Because if you don't do that, then you will find that your members find you irrelevant. Another way is to get your survey responses and then prioritize your needs. Look at where you are at and then start to offer what is available, the low-hanging fruits, as you move on to the most difficult things. I will tell you that is in my experiences, the most difficult things are usually around advocacy. The reason for that is because it takes a long time to get anything sorted out. And it takes a very long time to get policies to be passed and laws and such kinds of things. So that's the most difficult. But the rest of the things, you will find that there are ways you can sort it out. You can either look for partners to help you sort out what you cannot manage. You can decide to begin it from very, way below. You can decide to approach it from small bits, in bits or step-by-step process. I'm not sure what would be impossible. I wish I knew what was really impossible, but those are some of the things that I'd advise them to take that up.
Great, thank you, Grace, and thank you, John, for that question. We have another question here, and this is going to make you really think, Grace. The question is, given that Kenyans are very poor in reading and reading culture, what would you use to attract them to develop reading culture?
All right, that's interesting. Well, he's right. We in Kenya, we don't read very much. It's a culture that we have not inculcated in ourselves over a long period of time, but we are learning. And what I would say is that begin from where people are at. I have found that to always be the best way to do things. Start from where people are at. In Kenya, people are very good at, for example, participating in concerts. So you may want to begin your information, or you begin to conduct or distribute your information in that kind of a forum. But then also the other thing that you can do is to shorten the reports and make them more visual. That's how to attract people to read them. So for example, you may want to, if you have a report about the effect of COVID-19 on the markets, you may want to put images, just very short images, short stories, and then do a photo gallery of some sort like that. That would help people to read and start to read. And then after that, you could always put a note, a URL link to your report to force them to go there. And that's the way to encourage people. Begin from where they are at. What do they read? We know definitely Kenyans must read cartoons. They must look at the cartoon. If they look at the daily cartoon, editorial cartoon, they must look at it in the newspaper. You want, because they're attracted to that, you may want to package the information like that and then put your URL down there to encourage them to read. Also, before I finish, also find another way, excuse me, find another way to present that information. Instead of just putting it in books, how else can you present it?
Great, thank you, Grace. I do have the survey that you shared with me pulled up, if you wanted to talk about that for a little bit, because we do have two questions here about, one is about the formatting of the survey, formatting, collecting, and presenting a survey. So Kenneth, hopefully this will help you with the presentation of the survey. And then Michael, although you got cut off on the audio, this will really help you see some of the other visual content aids other than infographics.
Right.
Let me pull this up. Great. Okay, here we go.
All right, so this is a report that was conducted on fraud in healthcare during the COVID-19. It's a very recent one, April 2020. And we are not going to go through the report itself. It's 66 pages, but I just wanted to, talk about the presentation of how you present it. If you look at, for example, the executive summary, that is what most people will read. It's very well presented, straightforward, short paragraphs, very short sentences, but they have the red highlight there. That's very important because it brings out the most important fact so that people do not forget it. Like they say, fraud and corruption led to deaths in every third country surveyed. So you see, it actually brings out a very important part of the conversation, and that's one of the visual, those are some of the visual ways we're saying when you're presenting. If you move to the next page, you will see, yes, there. So a graphic, an image, and a little text there explaining what that is all about, talking about the same thing. And then you move on to the methodology, but let's go to the key findings. That is where I want us to go to, because that's where the presentation is important. Just move to key findings, Michael. That's the next page after that.
Right here?
Yes, right there. There you go. So you see, key findings, they can be represented. This was a report that was conducted in various countries, and you can see the regional distribution of the report. So you don't need a lot of text in there. You have maps that tell you the country that was covered in this survey. In this report, the countries that were covered in the survey are the ones that are in blue. The black ones were not covered. So they give you the entire the world map for every region, and then it tells you precisely where the report was, the survey was actually conducted. If you go to the next page, you're able to see the core issues. Again, just a representation of the report. And it's very straightforward. It has very good graphics. So now we're not just talking about infographics, we are also talking about graphs. We've talked about maps. Now we are talking about graphs, and we are seeing how it's well presented right there. You move, again, if you go to page, let me see, this is page, yes, you go to page 18, Michael, page 18, you will be able to see, again, a combination of various ways of presenting your information so that it's interesting. So you're able to see page 18, should be next after that.
Right after this, okay.
There, key findings, consequences. So we have that. Another very nice way you can mix things. So you have the big highlights that we saw, the graphics, the highlights of the text that we saw, but we also see a graph. So it's mixed there. There's not a lot of text, but it's very appealing. When you look at it, you can quickly get the information at a glance. And really, in just a few minutes, you can quickly look at the report and decide what you want to find out and see what information is interesting for you and what makes sense. Now, your report should be presented. Those are the kind of visuals I was talking about. When you have visuals like this, what is going to happen is that you will be in a position to also, when you have visuals like this, you will be also in a position to actually showcase a lot of information, but also have very good content for your social media pages, because social media thrives with things like this. So when you have this kind of information, you develop your reports in this way. It allows you to really tell your story very quickly, tell it in different platforms, and tell it in very few words. And of course, visuals are very important. People don't forget visuals. If you can couple this with a story, a feature story, whether on newspaper or on video, or it could even be on social media, Facebook Live, whatever, it would really work perfectly in terms of fostering the message, in terms of memory, in terms of generating or guiding the conversation. Thank you, Michael.
Great, thank you, Grace. Great, we've had a few more questions come in. So I'm actually going to combine two questions. Kenneth, part of your question was about presenting the survey, but it was also about if there's a specific format of survey or collecting the data. Alan also says that they are developing a tool to survey the effect of COVID-19 on input supply chain, and that when testing the tool, the telephone test gave a big variance. So Alan, I assume maybe your question is what is a typical experience with a telephone survey, and potentially some of the benefits, but also challenges of them. Grace, could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you, Michael. So sometimes when you test your, and that's the reason we said you must test. When you test your survey, your tool rather, you find that you get differences. Again, the difference will be determined by who did you talk to. The difference, see, the thing about a telephone survey is that it's very targeted. It makes sure that your question goes to the right person, and that's very, very important. The problem, on the other hand, is that if your questions were not properly done, then you find that you have a challenge of making sure that you have the correct answers, or you have the relevant information that you're looking for. Therefore, telephone interviews are good, and of course, I would say they're the best in terms of testing your tool, because you're really going to talk to the real audience that you're really looking information from, and that helps you very much. On the other hand, if you just send it out online, you may get responses that are really off, and that may not really help your survey. So yeah, that happens sometimes. I don't know that I've answered both questions or just one.
Yeah, I think that was good. Great, thank you, Grace. Michael from Nigeria also says that, and I know that you're experiencing this at the moment, Grace, the issue of power has always been a major problem in Nigeria. In that case, what is a good alternative to an online survey apart from paper? And I think you actually did a great job of just answering this, that a telephone survey is an appropriate form of survey because those lines tend to stay alive even when the power is down. Would you agree, Grace?
Yes, definitely. The telephone would be the best way to sort it out, to make sure that you get the responses from that, because yes, power is a big issue in many countries, including ours. It depends on how you do that. And even in addition to that, in addition to the power, is also the aspect of data, because depending on where you live, the bandwidth may not be appropriate for you to conduct a proper online questionnaire. Like when people are not able to quickly load pages, they may get discouraged and may not want to participate in online questionnaires. So power and data, those are some of the factors that you want to look at when you're generating or when you're trying to collect your information. Remember that if you don't collect your information properly, you don't get a good report. You don't get a good report, you don't have a good argument. And that just makes you lose your credibility at the end of the day.
Great, thank you. Dennis asks where he can find the survey that you covered. This is a good question about the distribution of reports, Grace.
Yes, so this survey, we can upload it. Of course, first Michael will send it to you, and we can also upload it on our website, myniusline.com, and you can be able to get it through that link.
There you go, thank you. Okay, a few more questions here. Francis asked that they have been interviewing respondents with surveys, with a survey that takes more than 30 minutes, and that it seems by the end, the respondents seem bored. Could you, Grace, talk about maybe your ideal length of a survey? And then also Francis's question is, can you trust the authenticity of those responses in a longer survey like that if the respondent loses interest?
Okay, good point. Sometimes when you have very long surveys, of course, people will lose interest. I find that when you have very long surveys, the best way to approach it is probably to do a focus group discussion. That would be best, where people talk instead of you giving them questions or sending them a questionnaire online to fill in. And because, of course, that affects, like he said, the authenticity of the data. You start to wonder whether people are just saying things to get over with it or because they wanted to go. So you may want to consider a focus group discussion if you really have want to make this very long. It helps you to get better information, and people generally people like to talk and to listen to themselves. So it works very well when you allow them to voice out what it is that they're saying rather than as opposed to them filling in something. On the same breath also, if you're doing an online questionnaire, the longest it should take should be 5 minutes at most. If it can take shorter than that, even better, but 5 minutes is what is most appropriate.
Great, thank you, Grace. Anne from the Turkana Chamber says, in a survey to establish the effects of COVID-19, does it have the factor of timeliness? And can you do this survey after the period is over?
Okay, very good question, also very relevant to our times. Right now, it depends. I know that some organizations may not have conducted what we'd call a baseline survey to just find out where are we at as far as COVID, where are our businesses at as far as the COVID-19 situation is concerned right now. So if you have not done that, not to worry, you're still, within time because COVID-19 is not over. But yes, certain situational surveys like the one we are conducting right now is definitely, or the situation we are in COVID-19 is definitely time bound. But also, because it's time bound, it makes sense when you're able to tell the story best, like on a timeline. So you may want to consider telling your story from the perspective of what happened or what was the situation to where are we at right now. And that is where the aspect of timeliness comes in. Also, you want to do this, and this is very important, and I like that question because certain information can only make sense if it comes at the right time. Like, for example, the effect of COVID-19 to the transport sector, for instance, that is changing day by day. So if you give us the data that you collected last month, it may not be relevant today. So in terms of the aspect of timeliness, how quickly you turn around your reports is very important. And that's why when we're having the conversation, I said the most effective way to conduct surveys right now is to conduct online surveys because it works perfectly. It gives you a quick turnaround You don't have to take too long to analyze the data, because a lot of the tools that we have online already do that for you. Your work is really to interpret and tell the story from the data that you collect.
Great, thank you, Grace. So now I'm going to take a moment to thank all the attendees who have stayed with us during this time, and I'm going to introduce CIPE Africa's Regional Director, Lars Benson, to discuss a grant that has recently been opened for associations and chambers that are looking to respond proactively to COVID-19. So Lars, if you're with us, please feel free to jump in.
Yeah, hello everyone. Thank you, Grace, for a very interesting presentation as always, and very informative. I wanted to announce for all of you that are associations out there that CIPE is running a competition. It will be, we need to have the applications by June 12th. And so this new competition is talking about best practices and innovations that either address how associations are responding to the pandemic or how associations are assisting in economic recovery. So they can be on specifically on how are you even generating revenues for your association? How are you changing your leadership or governance structures? How are you advocating for government and or community policies and regulations to address the health crisis? What you might be doing to safely reopen the economy. And specifically and definitely relevant to today's conversation, innovative methods of communication with government members and stakeholders. And then also finally, an important component, which is how are you mobilizing your members or businesses to assist communities to recover from the pandemic. So we invite you to send us an email at africa@cipe.org. And again, the competition will be closing on June 12th. CIPE will be providing a small grant or honorarium in the form of $1,000 for the most innovative ideas. And we also do have a newsletter where we are sharing these best practices. The winners will be highlighted in the newsletter, as well as other forms of communication through the CIPE network. So this would be a great opportunity to highlight some of the great work that all of you are doing. And I encourage all of you to apply on the competition. Again, the deadline is June 12th. The best way to think about it is essentially to send us a one-page, one-paragraph email on what is this innovative idea or change that your association has implemented.
Wonderful, thank you, Lars. And again, that information to the campaign can be found in last week's newsletter, and will continue to be highlighted. And again, you can email africa@cipe.org if you have more questions. And I also just shared the link in the chat box for anybody interested. So great, thank you, Lars. Grace, I will just turn it back over to you if you had any closing points today. It seems most of our questions have wrapped up. Yeah, and Alan, we can get you the email contact. And John, we can discuss over email. Thank you for your questions. Grace, back over to you. I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah, sure. I want to thank everybody, all our participants, for joining with us today in today's webinar. We're very grateful for your attention and your time. We don't take it for granted that you've accepted to participate in the webinar. I am very excited that Lars has made this grand announcement during this webinar, because it gives all the people a reason as to why they should be attending CIPE webinars, and we discussed this last time. So Lars, I'm glad that you took my lesson very seriously. I'm very glad that we have that. So I want to encourage everybody to conduct a survey. Don't think it's a very complicated thing. Please go ahead and work with the tools that you have right now. Go online. Everything is possible. It's very possible right now. And finally, if you're having any problems, remember that we are always available. You send an email to Michael always says you send to africa@cipe.org. I believe that's the correct email address, and you will be able to get some assistance. I am also available to help you think through things and offer my technical support from Machakos, Kenya. That's where I am at. Thank you very much, guys, and enjoy your day.
Thank you, Grace. And for all who are still with us, just want to put on your radar that for next week, we have an upcoming event about revenue generation with our CIPE consultant, Carmen Stanilla. That'll be on Wednesday, June 3rd, beginning at 9 a.m. Eastern time. So we hope you can join us. You'll get an invite for that in your inboxes. And thank you all for your questions. Thank you, Grace, always for joining us and also just helping us at CIPE adapt to this new work environment. You've been integral to our ability to deliver on our promise to associations, and we appreciate you so much for doing that. Great. All right, everybody. Well, enjoy your morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you.
Bye.